Today I will be ranking every single boss fight in COD Zombies history. Literally every single one, starting with Oz and Descent, all the way to current day with the Sam and Richtofen boss fights on Reckoning. Today I will discuss every single boss fight in COD Zombies and give you my thoughts on them. Now before we hop into the video, I want to go over what I'm counting as a boss fight, and also my criteria for ranking these bosses. What counts as a boss fight is, obviously, the main Easter egg bosses. We'll be including those bosses, but I will also be including a few maps where there's no boss fight, and those maps have a little something different. So when I talk about these maps, I'll be talking about their final sequence right before the end cutscene. Now believe me, I know they're not a boss fight. You don't have to correct me in the comments, but I know for a fact if I don't include this, then Jared will get angry in the comments at me. So spare me your angry comment, Jared. Tag der Toten is on here. Next, let's talk about my criteria. Now, as always on my videos, this is my own personal, subjective list, okay? Me having one boss fight over another boss fight on my personal list isn't saying that you have to think that. It's not saying that everybody thinks that. It's just me stating my own personal opinions. But things I'll take into account for these rankings are good difficulty on the boss, to where it's difficult but not unfair, the boss's design, their attacks, unique win conditions, the boss fight arena, and of course the most important part, the soundtrack. Anything else in these maps outside of the boss fight is not in any way, shape, or form determining its ranking. This is strictly on the boss fights. So if you guys enjoy this video, be sure to drop a like, comment your list down below, and with that being said, let's start off with my F tier. So like always, we're going to start off with the F tier. These are the worst boss fights in Zombies history. They are never fun to do, whether they're really easy, ridiculously unfair, or there's just something else about it that I hate. All of these fights are, in my opinion at least, terrible. So with that being said, in my opinion, the worst boss fight in Zombies history is the Darkest Shores. This is my least favorite boss fight of all time. To beat it, you have to beat 4 waves of this boss fight to win, and the way you beat the phases is you have to damage all 4 super beefed up enemies that will attack you. It's not a bad concept, but in execution, oh my god is it terrible. From the fog being ramped up so you can't see the enemies, to not being able to get any armor until after phase 2, to phase 2, the U-boat pen section, which has a Brenner that spawns and random fire that'll pop up out of the ground and damage you too. In co-op, this boss fight might not be too bad, but on solo, it's so unbalanced and so unfair that it's hands down the worst boss fight of all time. Coming in next is Beast from Beyond. Now this is another terrible fight because just like the Darkest Shores, this boss fight is ridiculously unfair. It's a cryptid only boss fight, and you gotta beat 5 phases of cryptids to win. Only problem is, to beat some of these phases, you gotta fend off against tons of cryptids with janky movement and hitboxes that not only isn't like how it was in Extinction, but also somehow doesn't fit Infinite Warfare's gameplay either. So many downs in this fight happen because a random cryptid will spawn in a portal right in front of you, and this hitbox will trap you, and before you even have time to react, the rest of the cryptids will catch up to you and down you. Things like that, or when a phantom will teleport right in front of you, resulting in the same thing happening. And then at the very end of this boss fight, you have 2 complete bullet sponge enemies and the 2 blue rhinos that are so boring and anticlimactic to fight, it's insane. Like, part of me thinks that in another universe this boss fight would have been better and this final fight would have been against like ancestors or something, and that would have made for a really cool fight, but Infinite Warfare was scrapped on time, making one of the best boss fights in Zombies history. Spoiler. So they just made the ending of this fight bullet sponges and an anticlimactic ending to a very annoying boss fight. Not much better than this is The Order from Firebase Z. This is also a terrible fight, don't get me wrong, but at least this boss fight isn't unfair. After you watch a cutscene, you'll spawn in the boss fight arena, and you gotta take out this order to oh, it's already over. Okay. Yeah, this boss fight can literally be completed in 3 seconds with the RPG or streaks, and I believe there's other ways to do it on top of that, but even if you try to take this boss fight slow and do it the intended way, it's just not a good fight. His attacks aren't very strong, and also, did I mention the fact that this boss is stationary? Need I say more? D Machine might have the single weirdest boss fight of all time, because to beat this, again, boss fight, you get teleported in the Pack-a-Punch room and you gotta protect Orlov from the zombies so his progress meter will go up. The only problem is, even though the game tells you to protect him, there is no fail condition for not protecting him. You can leave him here to get bullied by the zombies for as long as you want to, and you won't fail this fight. So why does the game tell you to protect him? Now yes, you do have to get the zombies off of him so he can advance the lockdown, but even then, there's literally no fail condition or anything. The only way to lose this boss fight is if the normal zombies somehow corner you, and in D-Machine's Pack-a-Punch room, that'll pretty much never happen. The next boss fight on my list is a boss fight that I don't even have experience with, and that's because this next boss fight is on Modern Warfare Zombies. Now you're probably wondering why I'm even ranking it if I haven't played it, and that's because I got a hold of a very special Modern Warfare Zombies fan, fellow Zombies YouTuber A Total Dork, to drop by and give us his opinions on all these fights in this game. So without further ado, let's hear what A Total Dork has to say.
Modern Warfare Zombies is a game I genuinely like, but its introduction to mercenaries was questionable. Serving as a third faction in gameplay, the soldiers of Terminus Outcomes, yes, that Terminus, exist in stark contrast to the undead. Encounters play more like a campaign mission than a wave shooter, and taking on any of the 4 warlords is like playing that campaign mission while a waffle iron clamps down on your testicles. Whether its legacy and its plethora of traps, trophy systems, and target dummies, or don't compete with her army of drones, carries, and her impenetrable smoke screens, or Rainmaker's explosive touch, gameplay between the 4 remains remarkably similar. Go to a merc camp or buy station to obtain a stronghold keycard, raid that compound to obtain a fortress keycard, and go through the unrewarding process of shooting enemies behind cover, pushing up to clear the next room, and rinsing and repeating until you finally kill your target. The reward for spending 10 minutes of your 45-minute match doing all of this? 1 reward rift, containing an often useless weapon blueprint, a miscellaneous set of items you could have got literally anywhere else, and after considerable community backlash, a random wonder weapon case. Which is nice, but not worth all of this. If this is the kind of game you want to play, do yourself a favor and just replay World at War's campaign.
Things will change, my friend. As heroes, we will return to Russia's embrace.
Okay, doesn't sound like I missed much with it, but anyways, let's move on to the next boss fight, which I actually can talk about. BO3 has some really bad boss fights, but this one is the worst. Like, I don't know why anyone thinks this is a good boss fight. This boss fight is a complete joke. Wait, why is there garage gameplay on the screen? Hold on, let me fix that real quick. There we go. As I was saying, Zetsubo Noshima's boss fight is a complete joke. To beat it, you gotta run around this room and make sure you don't get one hit down by the Thrashers, and then shoot Takio's arms with the KT-4. And speaking of which, if you go down, I really hope the KT-4 wasn't your meal kit gun, because if it was, and you just lost it, then your game is now soft locked, and there's nothing you can do. You have to restart the Easter egg from the very beginning so you can get to KT-4 again. Y'all were probably expecting a different BO3 boss fight to pop up before Zetsubo, but at least in those terrible boss fights, at least you can't get locked out of winning due to poor game design. And speaking of which, it really hurts me to make a ranking video and have anything involving Shadows of Evil near the bottom, but I mean, this boss fight's just bad. That sentence took 3 years off my life. After the flag step, you go to Pack-a-Punch and interact with the 4 keepers and shoot him around 8 times to place the summoning key on his table, and that's it. Literally, I showed the entire boss fight uncut because it's that quick. Like I said, it is not a good fight at all, but at least there's some timing to get down with the Shadow Man boss fight, because once you interact with the Keeper, you'll have about 8 seconds to trap him with the summoning key, or also teleport back in his bubble, and you'll have to interact with the Keepers again. And additionally, every time you fail this, the game will spawn into Margwa, so at least there's some challenge, I guess? But with that being said, with every failed attempt, the Shadow Man will linger for longer and longer before teleporting back, so you're pretty much guaranteed to beat this boss fight within like 5 attempts max. Now, if we're talking about this boss fight and we're including the step after this, where you gotta hit the gate worm with the tram, then this boss fight would rank higher, because that step is great, but I don't count it to be a part of this boss fight, so unfortunately, the Shadow Man boss fight in Shadows of Evil is going in F tier. You know what else is going in F tier? The Shadow Man boss fight again, this time on Revelations. You do not know how disappointed I was to load in this boss fight for the first time and figure out that it was just a slightly harder Shadows of Evil. I was so annoyed. Like, it's literally Shadows of Evil's boss fight, but with one extra step. You gotta place down the summoning key and charge it like a soul box, throw it at Sophia, and then do Shadows boss fight again to win. Keep in mind, this is the ending of Black Ops 3, by the way. And it's sad too, because this boss fight arena is actually really cool looking, and they completely wasted it. At least with this boss fight, there can be some challenge, from the Panzers and Margwa spawning, to the Shadow Man changing the boss fight arena like he does in the Margwa lockdown, but with that said, neither of these are a big deal with how overpowered you are. And the last boss fight in my F tier, this one hurts me too, it is Blood of the Deads. Hot take time, I like most of Blood's Easter egg. I really do. Yeah, I know I'm a psycho. But this boss fight is so anticlimactic compared to the rest of this quest, it is insane. The rest of this quest has us doing really hard challenges, but then after that, you go in the boss fight, kill 12 wardens, shoot 6 orbs, then Richtofen comes out, stuns the warden, and you one-tap the big warden to win. This boss fight feels like less of a boss fight and more like a weird game mode you cook up in custom mutations. This boss fight is by far my single least favorite thing about Blood of the Dead. And there's a little tease for you. Now we're going into my D tier. These boss fights aren't quite the worst boss fights of all time, but they still are pretty bad. And starting off my D tier is the second boss fight in Outbreak, aka the one where you fight an Orda. After your amazing parachute down, you gotta kill some zombies and an Orda. You know, the boss on the map before. But hey, at least this one can move. So that's pretty nice, but with that said, it's still the Orda, so if you bring Ring of Fire plus a good gun, then he'll go down fairly quickly. But even if you don't have a well-upgraded gun, he's still not a threat to you. As long as you're on the run, then there is a very low chance that he can down you, so this boss fight ends up being a nothing burger just like Firebase Z's, but like I said, at least this one can move. The next boss fights in my ranking are 2 different Modern Warfare Zombies bosses. Boy, they're not on a great run, are they? So once again, let me toss it over to Total Dork so he can help us rank these.
The debate around the most annoying enemy type in Zombies is one that's raged on since special enemies were initially added to the series, but ask anyone who's played Modern Warfare Zombies and they'll tell you that Kravier is among the worst. For those who didn't play MWZ or managed to block this from your memory, in the Season 2 story mission, after briefly uniting with mercenaries in the Dark Aether and clearing a spore-infested mall to capture their commanding officer, the player and Ravenov hold out against waves of the undead while a modified ACV unit generates a portal for us to escape back to Urzikstan. When the portal is completed, the mercenaries escape ahead of us, leaving us and Ravenov to fight a special shock mangler who will periodically emit an electric pulse that stuns the player, preventing them from sprinting while also forcing them to fire their weapon at the floor. The stuns are as annoying as the mangler is over-recycled, but enough firepower from medium to long range is enough to take him down without issue. And thankfully Treyarch realized just how annoying these shock enemy types are, and they never brought them back ever again. Finding the most forgettable boss is an inherently difficult task. After all, if a boss fight is literally forgettable, you would forget to consider it in the first place, and that's exactly what almost happened to Modern Warfare 3's Disciple Duo. After entering the Season 3 story mission, we follow a rogue Dr. Jansen as she enters this Ethereum storm, and after destroying 2 red crystals to disperse that storm, we can recover her unconscious body. Or at least attempt to. With the entity in control, we must cleanse 4 relics by filling them with zombie souls, and on our way to the 4th and final relic, we encounter our first disciple. Tauxia is fought like any other disciple, with its only party trick being summoning additional special enemies and preventing itself from taking damage while those specials are on the field. This in combination with its regen attack could have been a nasty combination, but with maxed out weapons we can basically face roll this entire fight. The same, unfortunately, is also true of our second disciple. Available in both the regular and elder version of the Season 3 Dark Aether, after completing all 3 contracts, players might notice some exposed spores in the center of the map. Shooting these spores and the final large spore in the center reveals a secret, harder version of the previous story mission's boss. Although this disciple is mechanically identical to the last, the Dark Aether's increased difficulty provides a much harder challenge than the story mission. Why are there so many dogs? But with that said, if the player uses a powerful weapon and keeps the 3 specialized equipment exclusive to this Dark Aether, they have the firepower needed to banish this boss just as quickly.
Now let's move on to the next boss fight I can talk about, which is Forsaken. Forsaken's boss fight is weird. The scale is really cool, and his attacks are also pretty cool, but the boss fight is ridiculously easy, and it's very linear as well. You gotta shoot his shoulders, torso, and head until you break these 4 crystals, then get kills on his Samantha so she charges a turret, then shoot the turret at his weak point 1 time to break it. You gotta shoot him 4 times to win, and by the end of it, I'm just not having fun. The next boss fight to take place in the story is next, and that is Liberty Falls. I like Liberty Falls more than most people, but this boss fight is easily the worst part about this map. It's basically the HVT step from this entire Easter egg, but instead of leaving them one tapped, you fully kill them. In phase 1, you beat a horde of zombies. In phase 2, you kill zombies and an HVT mangler. And in phase 3, you kill zombies and an HVT abomination. This used to be a somewhat engaging boss fight since it, number 1, takes place in a church, and number 2, the launch weapons weren't nearly as good as the DLC weapons. But nowadays, if you take most DLC weapons in this boss fight, like the Maelstrom, the Olympia, the Siren, the Essex, I could go on. These weapons will absolutely destroy these enemies so fast, it's insane. So if you're using a weaker weapon, then it's a pretty engaging fight, but if you're using a gun that's remotely useful, then you'll be in and out of this fight in 3 minutes. And to finish off my D tier, we're going to talk about the Quarterfex boss fight. Now, I'm going to be frank, I don't remember this at all. So because of this, I got a hold of a very special person that knows Vanguard zombies in and out that could confidently share his opinions on the boss fights in this game. Let me toss it over real quick so y'all can hear what the legend himself, Mr. John Rizzo, has to say about Quarterfex.
Quarterfex the Deathless. Oh man, this one is, it's rough, to put it lightly. The 3 big problems with this fight are, number 1, Quarterfex is not a threat in the slightest. I know that sounds crazy, but his attacks are so insanely telegraphed and the frequency of them is so slow, I genuinely cannot fathom anyone dying to them. Ignore the part where my perks go from 4 to 3 in this footage. I was getting a cinematic shot and got 1 tap by the orb, leave me be. Worse yet is that his attacks don't feel natural, you know? I don't feel like I'm fighting this massive living creature hell-bent on my destruction. Instead, I feel like I'm fighting a static video game AI cycling through the same few animation states over and over and over again. Number 2, not only is Quarterfex not a threat, but you are in no real danger at any time throughout this fight. Outside of his summon attack, there's not a single idle zombie spawner throughout the fight. And because Quarterfex's attacks are so telegraphed, easily dodged, and infrequent, you're spending most of the fight just waiting for something to happen so you can damage him. I don't think every fight needs to be a brutal gauntlet that never lets up like Legion or anything like that, but I should not be able to inspect my weapon multiple times and check Twitter in the middle of your boss fight. Number 3, there's no real feeling of escalation throughout the fight. Giving Quarterfex a shield in phase 2, the ability to self-heal in phase 3, and adding Sturmkriegers to his summon attack in phase 3 are all good in theory, but again, it's all so slow and lifeless that you're never engaged in any real way. And the cherry on top of this complete fucking mess, if you decide to go back to the main map through the portal because you want covenants or perks or something like that, you can't go back to the plains, the most visually interesting part of the entire map, for the rest of the match. You literally couldn't even get that right.
Of course they couldn't, Rizzo. You remember what game we're talking about, right? But all jokes aside, thanks Rizzo for helping me rank Quarterfex, and with that, let's move on to my C tier. Now these boss fights aren't particularly bad, but I wouldn't really call them good either. A lot of these fights in this tier I do enjoy. It's not like I don't like them, but when you compare these boss fights to some of the best bosses ever, these boss fights, in my opinion, pale in comparison. Starting off this tier is the Stadtjäger boss fight on the second Tortured Path map. Now again, this technically isn't an Easter egg boss fight, but I know for a fact if I don't include the Tortured Path boss fights, then somebody is gonna complain in the comments, so let's just run through them real quick. This is the same boss from the Shadow Thrones boss fight, but it's a lot quicker. He has a lot less health, and you don't have to wait for his orange spot to glow to damage him either. He has the same attacks, but like I said, if you have the right gun, you can take him out really quickly, so he's kind of underwhelming. The next boss fight on my list is the Brenner fight from the first Torture Path map. On round 10 in the first Torture Path map, you gotta fight a Brenner from Final Reich in the Darkest Shores boss fight, but this time he has this massive bubble around him that you have to spray into to break, and then you can damage him like a normal Brenner. Now don't get it twisted, it's just a Brenner fight but with one extra step, but as I outlined in my C tier, this boss fight's not bad, but it's not particularly good either, so it goes right here. Coming in next is the Guardian fight. No, not that Guardian. This Guardian from the third map in the Tortured Path. He's a tanky boy that you gotta shoot in the head, and then once you take a decent amount of his health off, he'll run to the center of the map and try to replenish his health from the blood fountains. If you don't break these fountains, then he'll regenerate his HP all the way back up to full, but if you break them, then you'll stop his health regen and knock him on the ground for a bit too. He's not a bad boss fight. In fact, his structure itself is a great foundation that could have been built upon for a full-fledged Easter egg boss, but as he is in Tortured Path, he goes right here. It's incredible that the first boss fight in Zombies history is this high. The Oz boss fight from Exo Zombies came out in 2015 before Black Ops 3, and in my opinion, it's better than most of the boss fights in that game, which is crazy to think about. To beat this boss fight, you gotta activate the power switches and shoot the boss when he blitzes you in the middle. Don't get me wrong, it's a very formulaic boss fight, and the design itself could have been better too, but considering it was the first boss fight in Zombies history, I think it still holds up fairly well to this day. The next boss fight is the better of the two Vanguard boss fights, and that is the Echo fight on Shinonuma Reborn. Again, I beat it, but I don't remember anything about it, so once again, take it away, Rizzo.
The Echo of Syraxis. Functionally, she's just a clone of Zabala's AI, but given an immunity window until you kill specific zombies with the DG2 and lure her to the powered-up Relic Mirror. Because she's just a Zabala with extra steps, it ends up being a fairly easy, unengaging fight overall. However, I can't bring myself to call it completely useless because of two little things. First off, the way the DG2 is utilized in the fight is kinda neat. Most boss fights you can just do with whatever you want. Some boss fights make you use the weapon to damage the boss itself. But in the Echo's case, it's used to kill marked zombies, and the DG2 itself isn't actually all that effective on the Echo. So instead of hoarding all your wonder weapon ammo for the boss's vulnerability phase, the game asks you to pace your shots for the marked enemies. It's a very tiny mix-up, and it was technically done way better with the God King and Frozen Dawn, but I do still kinda dig it here. Something else I like is that they chose the dig site for this fight. At first, the wide open arena seems like a really good thing, but that actually makes the Sturmkriegers way more threatening because of their hit-scan miniguns. The only cover you can get in this arena is super close quarters, and because of how the Zabala AI works, you can't stay in that cover for too long before she flushes you out. The combination of a Sturmkrieger's hit scan and the Echo's energy eruptions means that you have to keep moving and take cover whenever possible. It's a nice balancing act, and I don't know if that was something the designers had in mind when choosing the dig site, but it ends up working surprisingly well either way. However, the very few cool details about the fight are completely ruined by the fact that you can instantly melt through an entire phase by just bonking her with the direct impact of an energy mine. So they really just never fix that, huh?
Thank you, Rizzo, for helping me rank the Vanguard boss fights and giving your thoughts on them, but now, let's get back to the stuff that I know fairly well. This next boss fight is a pretty hot take in this community from what I figured out in my Every Map Ranked video. Somehow. But the next boss fight is Raven of Redwoods. If I could describe this boss fight in one word, I'd use the word boring. To beat this boss fight, you gotta charge 1 to 3 soul boxes, wait for the big guy to slowly make his way inside this circle, then shoot a symbol that'll appear on his body every 10 seconds for around a minute. You gotta do what I just said 3 times to beat this boss fight, and it's not an intense boss fight like the Keeper fight. The phases don't get harder in difficulty. No, that tiny wall in the middle does not count as difficulty. And it doesn't have a good boss fight track either. It's just, well, boring. I think if the symbol shooting part wasn't a thing, or even if it was just at the very end of this fight, then I probably wouldn't be as hard in this fight as I am. But when it takes almost 8 minutes to beat this boss fight, and half of it is luring this big guy around this huge boss fight arena, it just makes for a, say it with me, boring experience. The next boss fight on my list is Attack of the Radioactive Thing. This boss fight has always been a guilty pleasure of mine. After you complete the single most complex Easter egg ever, you go in the boss fight, escort the bomb down to the beach, shoot the boss with the laser a few times, then do some laser parkour and set off the bomb to win. This boss fight can be slow at times like Raves, but in my opinion, Raves downtimes are so much worse than Attack's, it's not even close. But like the rest of Attack, I've always had a soft spot in my heart for this map and this boss fight, and it'll probably never change. The next boss fight is one that's not even a boss fight. It's the Seal of Duality escort step on Tag der Toten. Now, like the Machine, this is technically not a boss fight, but I know for a fact if I don't include this, I'll have some people complaining in the comments, so here we are. Tag ends the Ether story, and the final Easter egg step that you do in the Ether story is just walk around the map in this bubble and get 25 kills at 3 different spots around the map and survive at the end to win. It's a very underwhelming ending to this Easter egg, and the fact that there's no new enemies also makes it even worse. But like I always say with Tag, when you think about what this step means in the story, with you killing off all the zombies in the story and turning off all the power in the Ether story for good, I can't help but not like it. Bonus plus, it's really cool to see this map transform from Tag der Toten into Lethal Lava Land. It's pretty cool. And finishing off C tier is one that'll definitely give me some hate in the comments, but besides Liberty Falls, my least favorite Black Ops 6 boss fight is the Richthofen fight. Yes, you heard me right. I think the Richtofen boss fight is the second worst boss fight in this game. Let me just start by saying, I want to like this boss fight so much, man. I want to, I really do, but I just can't. It's a two-part fight where in the first part you fight Richtofen in a mech, which is a pretty fun fight even though it's just fighting a super tanky Uberklaus. It's still not a bad fight, but after you take out the mech, you then fight Richtofen, which is where my problems with this boss fight come in. When he gets out of the mech, he'll get a Wonderwaffe that can hit scan lock onto you across the boss fight arena, and he will one-shot kill you if you don't have armor every single time, completely bypassing Dying Wish. But if you have armor and you can survive the first shot, then he'll just rapid fire a second or a third shot that'll stun you and kill you. And that might not sound too bad for some of you, but if you're in a situation where you just run out of armor and you peek out from cover for just a second to grab that armor plate on the ground, that's enough time for Richtofen to one-shot kill you across the map. He can also one-shot you other ways in this fight, but the fact that he can one-shot kill you with no warning and perfect accuracy makes it so there's only one way to play this boss fight, and that's by just hiding from the boss. Literally. People like to dog on fights like Garrod because they can use Idolize on them. But there is a huge difference between wanting to become invisible to make it easy and needing to become invisible to have a chance at surviving. The only way to consistently beat this boss fight is by hiding from Richtofen in either Ether Shroud or smoke grenades. And when the only way to beat a boss fight is by hiding from the boss so he cannot attack you, I'm sorry, that is just poor game design. The first part of this boss fight where you're fighting him in the mech, that part is pretty engaging, which is what's saving this boss fight from getting an even lower ranking. But this could all very well change if Treyarch puts a hotfix out and makes it to where Richtofen either has a cooldown on his Wonderwaffe or he just can't one-shot you with it. If they made one of these two changes, then this boss fight could easily skyrocket all the way up, and I'm not even joking right now, to the bottom of my A tier, because this boss fight has the potential to truly be great, but because of what I just said, it's just not. So it's going right here at the end of my C tier. Now it's time for my B tier. Now these boss fights in my opinion are good, but for one reason or another, they're not great boss fights like the boss fights in my A tier and my S tier are, but they still do a pretty good job as a finale for an Easter egg. And the first map in my B tier is the Rat King fight on Shaolin Shuffle. Now this could have been my favorite Infinite Warfare fight, excluding Mephistopheles, because it's a pretty good boss fight for the most part, but there's one thing about it that I dislike. And this could just be a skill issue on my part, but I still do not understand how the brain step works. From what I can tell, you just run around the outside of the boss fight arena and wait for the zombies to worship the brain enough without the boss attacking them. I even throw the shuriken at the Rat King, just like the speedruns do, and even with that, it just seems to be a complete game of RNG to me. But that aside, the poison step is pretty unique and fun, the symbol step is cool, and the Rat King fights themselves are also enjoyable too. If the brain step was any less annoying to do, then I could probably see this boss fight being bumped up a few spots, because like I said, the rest of the boss fight is pretty good in my opinion, but as it is, it goes right here. The Panzer Mortar is a really cool boss from the first map in World War II. I mean, first off, just look at his design. Look how sick this is. Absolutely incredible. But as for the fight itself, the boss fight's in the central part of the map, and you gotta shoot the batteries off the blimp in the sky, charge them, and then place them on the boss to win. Now the boss fight itself is fairly simple, but it's still really enjoyable to do. And what makes this boss fight even better is that you have access to armor at all times too. I will say it is kinda dumb that we don't actually get to kill the Panzer Mortar, and after you place the third battery, we see it blow up in a cutscene. That's really lame, but outside of that, it's a really cool boss fight. Coming in next might be a hot take for the World War II guys. The next boss fight on my list is the God King boss fight on Frozen Dawn. Now first off, let me just say, like most of World War II, fantastic looking enemy, and the fight itself takes place in a beautiful boss fight arena. But to beat this boss, you gotta do enough damage to him in 3 separate phases, with him getting different attacks over time. In the first phase, he just shoots a beam at you. In the second phase, he can do a one-shot attack, and in the final phase, he will spawn enemies that will have a protective bubble around him, in which the only way to get rid of it is by throwing the hammer at them, aka one of the 4 wonder weapons. And this sounds like it'd be a problem, but thankfully, Sledgehammer realized that you might not bring the hammer in this boss fight, so Frozen Dawn actually spawns in all 4 wonder weapons in this boss fight for you to pick up at any point. But like I said, I like this boss, the arena, the wonder weapons being here, and the structure of the fight itself. I like all that, but the sole reason why it's so low is because I think it's just too easy. Besides the fact you can easily insta-kill him and they somehow never patched it. His attacks are all fairly predictable with a really long charge up time. For example, his wipeout attack. Sounds threatening, right? Well, it's not as threatening as it should be when you have like 5 seconds to get behind one of the 8 pillars in this boss fight arena to avoid it. And his phase 3 attack just spawning in enemies with a bubble around them, and these enemies doing pretty much nothing else. It makes it to where you can completely avoid attacking these guys and stopping him from spawning more, and therefore completely taking this attack away from him. The only challenging part of this boss fight is when he starts breaking the pillars in here, but even then, I don't find this part to be too challenging either, considering it's the very end of the DLC 4 boss fight. Like, this boss fight has every single thing that it could possibly take to be an S tier boss fight except for the single most important part, difficulty. The next boss fight on my list is the Stadtjäger fight on Shattered Throne. I think this is the best boss fight in this game. First off, this boss fight takes place on a blimp, which is already insane. But then you have the boss itself, which has 3 phases with different ways to beat them. In phase 1, you gotta shoot his orange spot when he's charging at you. In phase 2, you gotta shoot his orange spot, but this time when he's spawning in sizzlers. And in the third phase, you gotta spray the wonder bus at him when he's doing the dust tornado thing. This boss has a pretty good design for the most part, but there is one thing in it that drags this boss fight down for me, and that is the sizzlers. The sizzlers ruins Shattered Throne as a whole for me, but the boss fight's no exception. Once you get to phase 2, the boss will spawn 2 sizzlers at a time that are, if you don't know, super sprinting zombies. And with the way the World War II armor system works, these guys can very easily run up to you or run in front of where you're going and trap you and just delete your armor. If jug worked in this game like how it does in normal zombies, then this boss fight would probably be in my A tier. But as I mentioned in pretty much every single video that I mentioned World War II, I'm just not a fan of their armor system. And when you have super sprinting zombies in this tight boss fight arena that can run faster than you can to catch up to you, it can lead to some pretty annoying downs. I know that you thankfully have the trench knife in this map that can get your armor back occasionally, but even with that, the sizzlers can still catch up to you and take out your armor faster than you can keep up with it sometimes. And I can see it now, all the World War II fans that are watching this part are gonna go to the comments saying,
Scaleless you Joltz, you moron.
and that may be true, but I still can't look past a big part of this game that I just do not enjoy. And also, when you beat this boss fight, you legit will have no clue until you hear the success sound play like 15 seconds later. His death animation is crazy subtle. Wait, I won? But besides that, like I said, this is not a bad boss fight. It's just held down in my opinion by this game's systems. Now that we're done with World War II, let's throw in another Black Ops 6 boss fight here, because the next boss fight is the other Reckoning fight, the Sam one. In my opinion, it suffers from the exact same problem as Rave does to me, and the fact that this boss fight is drug out way too long because you're just waiting for the boss to do what you need them to so you can progress. With Sam, you either gotta wait for her to go in the center and spin around like a or you gotta wait for her to open her vents after a red laser attack. Besides those 2 instances, you literally cannot damage Sam. So you were just running around this boss fight arena, waiting for her to do one of these 2 things so you can advance. It's not a bad boss fight, and there are some cool things in it like the Sam trials that happen after each phase that can give you weapon nerfs if you don't beat it. Stuff like that's cool, but besides that, like I said, this boss fight's just a waiting game. A better waiting game, but a waiting game nonetheless. Sticking with Black Ops 6, the next boss fight on my list is the Tomb. Although the Tomb is a complete waste in most people's eyes, one thing that a lot of people like about this map is this boss fight. You interact with the Sentinel artifact, then you gotta shoot it to duplicate it 4 times, and then you gotta beat 4 waves of enemies that get harder with each phase. In the 5th phase, a zombie with a Sentinel artifact inside of him will spawn, and if this enemy hits you, then it'll be a 1-hit down. In the next phase, it'll be a zombie and a double gas with a Sentinel artifact inside. Then after that, you gotta kill the same enemies on top of a mimic, and then on the next phase after that, you gotta kill these same enemies plus an amalgam. And then in the 9th and final part of this boss fight, you gotta spray down the Sentinel artifact and break it before it completely wipes you out, bypassing Dying Wish and everything. Even though there's not a threatening main boss, this boss fight still keeps you on your toes this entire time. And I know that I said that Richthofen one-shotting you was annoying, and trust me, it is. But the difference between him and these enemies are, these enemies right here, they can't one-shot you across the map like Richthofen can. They have to be within normal attacking distance for them to hit you. So not only is it better in that aspect, but also in this fight you have the Ice Staff, which will slow the enemies down, and in between it and PhD Slider, I don't find the one-shotting bosses to be too big an issue in this fight. In my opinion, it feels like a proper challenge instead of it just being unfair. And also, bonus point for this boss by having 9 phases from beginning to end. This is a nice little nod to Chaos, but minus a bonus point for making it attack people.
That's not
how it works. Now we're in my A tier, and we have 16 boss fights left. I love all the boss fights in this tier, but in every single fight in my A tier, there is something in them that really bug me and hold it down from being S tier. So with that being said, the first boss fight in my A tier is the Valentina fight from Tag der Toten. The Valentina fight is a pretty good fight, especially compared to the rest of Cold War's round-based boss fights. She has multiple phases that take place in different parts of the map, and you actually gotta pay attention to her attacks, so why is it not higher? Well, that's because every single phase in this fight is pretty much the same. Outside of her getting the wipeout attack on phase 3, phase 5 is pretty much no different than phase 1. You pop her bubble, then spray her with the Cerberus until her bubble shows back up, and you rinse and repeat. It doesn't get harder to pop the bubble, she doesn't get more damage mitigation over time or anything. This boss fight just unfortunately does not ramp up in difficulty like it should. It's still a great boss fight, but because of that, it's going right here at 16. The next two boss fights are the last two Modern Warfare Zombies bosses, and according to Total Dork, they are the best boss fights in Modern Warfare Zombies. Do you agree? Let's find out.
Easter eggs in COD Zombies are often compared to raids in an MMORPG, but if any boss fight truly fits the definition of a raid boss, it's MWZ's trio of Dark Aether worms. Introducing us to this enemy type at the end of the Act 3 story mission, Orcus is by far the easiest of the three worms. With plenty of buildings to use for cover and only tier 2 zombies to contend with, we whittle down Wormy's health while dodging his projectile orbs, laser beams, and his literal face roll before our mission timer expires. This boss fight concludes the launch content for the game, but is immediately followed up on in Season 1. Entering the Dark Aether for the first time, we fill 4 obelisks with zombie souls to collect 4 of Dr. Jansen's items, and as we approach our exit, we encounter our second worm. Despite having a name that looks like a randomly generated Wi-Fi password, the noticeable lack of cover in this area and the introduction of a new attack that seemingly the entire world initially mistook for an unpredictable, nearly undodgeable insta-kill attack made this a significantly harder encounter than before, but still one a strong player could easily manage. But that isn't quite the case with our final worm. Existing as a world boss within the open world of Urzikstan, Greylorn presents a challenge unlike any other in the series. Love it or hate it, forcing 24 players into each and every single lobby of Operation Deadbolt is one of MWZ's greatest strengths, and while it's a miserable experience if you're, say, attempting to permadeath the entire boss gauntlet and random squads of 6 keep rushing the warlords you want to kill, if you're actually playing the game as intended, having the entire 24-player lobby all open fire on this enemy is actually a wonderful experience. That said, solo players can also take on Greylorn by themselves, though they'll more than likely have to rely on the VR11 Wonder Weapon as a crutch to do so. Ignoring the communal aspect and the switch from purple to red, the only major differences between our last worm and this one is the shorter time frame to finish the fight, the presence of the Aether Storm forcing players to monitor their gas masks, considerably more ads aiding the worm, and the side quests you must go on to trigger the fight in the first place. The legwork required to take on any of these 3 fights is more than any Easter egg in the entire series, but if you like MWZ, then I promise you, it's worth it. Coming hot off the heels of the unstable rift, expectations for MWZ's final update were rightfully beneath the Earth's crust, but Season 5's story mission would somehow become one of its best. After entering the Dark Aether with Ravenov and Dr. Jansen, we cleanse 4 relics and skip a short platforming section using our Scorcher Wonder Weapon to reach this portal. Entering this portal takes us to an area that's totally not a boss fight arena, except yes, that's exactly what it is, as Treyer confronts the player with their worst nightmare: women. Mechanically, this fight is as straightforward as they come. The entity is invulnerable unless the giant glowing orbs are shot, and dodging her attacks is as simple as leaping off the edge of the map if need be, but where the boss gets her formidable reputation is from the Echo entity, a secret, harder version of the fight, only reachable after doing a side Easter egg that unlocks this secret room with its own dedicated portal. This version of the fight cranks the intensity up to the limit, and is only beatable by the greatest G-Fuel snorting gamers out there. Or at least that's what they say. Although I've done this version of the fight using a regular sigil, I'm yet to even attempt it using an Elder sigil, which makes the difficulty even harder. But I will one day. One day soon.
And doesn't sound too bad. Maybe one day I'll buy Modern Warfare Zombies and see if he's right. But thank you, Total Dork, for helping with the NWZ bosses. And with that, let's get on to the next boss fight on my list, which is 9. Now this one might get me in some hot water. This boss fight is so cool. From the arena, to the crowd watching you, to the music in this fight, to the bosses, which are 2 elephants. This boss fight is just completely off the charts, but it is really easy. Even without the Hellion, if you just use the Wonder Weapon, or the Shield, or the Spitfire, the Daemon, all those weapons are super effective against the elephants, and I just feel like they don't have enough health. I don't even think their attacks are the problem necessarily. If the elephants just had like double the health that they do, then I think that would give the elephant enough time to be a real threat, but that's not how it is on 9. In reality, it is very easy, so it's going right here at the number 13 spot. And sticking with chaos, the next boss fight is the werewolf from Dead of the Night. In this fight, you fight a werewolf, and to beat it, you gotta turn these statues to point at a green square, then shoot the werewolf inside this green square to be phase 1, and then phase 2 you kill an onslaught of enemies, and in phase 3 you do the exact same thing as phase 1, except this time the green square is invisible and you have to find it. It's a pretty good fight, but like 9, I feel like it could have been harder. And again, like 9, you don't even have to bring in the Hellion to see this. In fact, the Hellion's not even the best weapon for this boss fight, because that would be the Spitfire, but besides that, again, there are like 5 or 6 different weapons you can use in this boss fight with silver bullets, and when paired with the Annihilator or Homunculus, this boss fight does leave some challenge to be desired. This next entry I'm definitely going to be taking some liberties with, and most of y'all will not agree with this, and that is fine. Remember, this is my own personal list. Well, mostly my own list. And I play this next boss fight a lot differently than y'all do, but this next boss fight is the Avogadro boss fight on Alpha Omega. To beat this boss fight, you gotta charge the 4 soul boxes in a bunker, and then trap the Avogadro back in the APD, and that's it. On normal difficulty, this boss fight is very underwhelming. The zombies don't spawn in nearly fast enough for this to be engaging, but I don't do this boss fight on normal. Remember, I'm a psychopath. So I do this boss fight on realistic, and in realistic, it is as challenging as it should be. When you play this boss fight on realistic, the zombies spawn in so much faster than they do on normal that this boss fight is actually challenging. Not only that, but obviously since you're playing realistic, you're playing with a one hit down, and that also makes this boss fight a lot more fun. If I were ranking this boss fight based off its normal difficulty, then I would rank it around the top of C tier, maybe bottom B tier, but I personally pretty much only experience this boss fight on realistic anymore, so I think it's fair to rank it based off of how I normally play it. The Legion boss fight is yet another boss fight that I see a lot of people hating. This one because of the timer on the screen, but to be completely honest, I've always liked this boss fight. You have 10 minutes to break the Legion's guard and destroy the 3 orbs that float out of him to win. While doing this, you gotta deal with a bunch of boss enemies that'll try to take you out as well. Initially, you will, not probably, but you will get overwhelmed and you'll force yourself to play faster, causing you to die. But once you realize that this timer on the screen is pretty much there to mess with you, this boss fight becomes a lot more enjoyable. If you know what you're doing in this fight, you can fail to break one of his orbs up to 3 different times in this boss fight, and you will still have enough time on the clock to beat this boss fight. Like I said, the timer's not really a big deal, but a lot of people don't understand this, so they'll always play a mental game with themselves in this boss fight, and they'll fixate on the timer and try to beat it in like 4 minutes, and it'll cost them the run like 90% of the time. But if you take this timer out of your mind, just like put a sticky note over it or something, then not only will you be more comfortable in here, but it'll also make you realize that this is a pretty good fight and it's not just enemy spam like some people say it is. Now, with as good of a fight as this is, it is kind of dumb that outside of a few attacks, the Legion is not very threatening. If I could tweak this boss fight to make it even better, then I would make it so he has a little less HP, but he also has 1 more attack and moves around more as well. That way, you're breaking him faster, but he's also doing more, making for an even more engaging fight. But as is, I still really enjoy the Legion fight. This is not only my single favorite boss fight in all of Cold War Zombies, but it's also my single favorite thing to do on Cold War Zombies. Out of anything in Cold War Zombies, the Legion boss fight is my favorite. The next boss fight on my list is the Z-Rex boss fight on Shattered Veil. Now this boss fight is pretty great. You gotta damage the Z-Rex enough to beat all 4 phases, and each one ramps up a difficulty, but especially the last 2, it's insane. It's to the point where if you're not staying on the run most of the time, then the Z-Rex can easily catch up to you and one-shot you. I absolutely love the latter half of this boss fight, but unfortunately, before he charges up at the end of phase 2, I find this boss fight to be fairly easy. In between how slow the Z-Rex is and BO6's movement, it, I don't ever come close to going down in this fight until at least the third phase. Thankfully though, if I want a harder boss fight on this map, I can actually get one with the round 100 hard boss fight. This makes this boss fight even more engaging, and if I could do this boss fight every single time I play this map without needing to get round 100 to do so, then this would probably rank higher, but I feel like the normal boss fight is a bit too easy in the beginning, so it's going right here at the number 9 spot. My favorite normal Infinite Warfare boss fight is next, and that is the aliens on Spaceland. Now let me just preface this entry with saying that I am a—
This boss fight is great. To beat it,
Okay, my commentary just started going off again for some reason. I don't know why. Now, let me just preface this with saying that I am a solo player. I've done this boss fight like 4 times on 2-player, but 99% of the time I do this boss fight, it's on solo. So I've never experienced the absurdity of having to fight 4 different aliens in this boss fight. Thank God. So I don't have that to weigh down my enjoyment of this boss fight, but in at least 2-player and especially solo, this boss fight is great. You play Samantha Says, then kill an onslaught of clowns, and then the aliens will spawn. You can only damage these aliens with the 4 wonder weapons or the exquisite, and you gotta shoot him enough to where his collar gets to red, and then melee your fuse off his backpack twice, and then get his collar to red a 3rd time to win. This boss fight requires constant focus because even if you take your eyes off the screen for a second, that's more than enough time for the alien to stun you and the zombies to catch up to you and down you. Not only that, but the aliens teleport around this boss fight arena as well, so you also got to keep track of where he's teleporting to. It will take you a bit, but once you get in the groove and you learn the distance to keep from the boss and the horde so you don't get stunned in them, this might just be me, but it was an extremely rewarding feeling. I'll never forget how many times I failed this boss fight on launch, and when I finally got it down, dare I say it made me want to play it more? Yeah, I know I'm weird. But even to this day, anytime I hop on this boss fight, it's always a very enjoyable experience. The next boss fight on my A tier is a classic boss fight. This is a lot of people's favorite fight in Zombies history, and for a while, it was mine too. I really love this fight, but the next boss fight on my list is the Giant Keeper fight under Eisendrach. This is a really great boss fight, especially for how early into the boss fight run this was. The Keeper will cycle between using all 4 different bow effects on you to try and kill you, and when he goes in the middle, you gotta place the Ragnaroks under him, damage the Keeper in his weak spot, then kill a wave of Panzers, and that's a phase. You gotta do this 3 times to win, and in my opinion, this boss fight has a fantastic flow. It was incredible for 2016, especially considering this boss fight came directly after Shadows of Evils and before Zetsubos, and I think this boss fight holds up pretty well to this day. I know some people get really annoyed by the wipeout mechanic, but to be honest, that's never really bothered me in this map. And because I have this boss fight in A tier and not S tier, you're probably waiting for the downside, and to be honest, there is no downside. I think this boss fight is just overall fantastic. I truly do. I've just personally burnt myself out on this boss fight. The Eisendrach is one of my most played Easter eggs of all time. So when I say that I've probably beaten this boss fight like 500 times, I legitimately probably have. So naturally, once you do this boss fight as many times as I have, it unfortunately starts to not hit the same for you as it once did. Again, it's still a great boss fight. I've just done this boss fight way too many times. And the final map in my A tier might be a hot take. Some people probably think it should be S tier, and other people think it should be like C or D tier because they do not like this boss fight at all. But the final boss fight in my A tier is none other than the Guardian boss fight on Citadel des Morts. This boss fight is sick. You gotta spray into the Guardian to break his armor, and then damage his weak points until they stop glowing. Over time, this boss fight will get smaller and smaller until at the very end of it, there is hardly any room for you to get away from the Guardian. And at this point, it is just a pure fight to the death. His attacks are really good, the structure of this fight with the breakpoints is also pretty good, and the boss fight arena itself, which might be the single best looking thing in Black Ops 6 Zombies. Now, some people think this boss fight sucks because he's a bullet sponge, but y'all, respectfully, don't know what weapons to bring in this boss fight. I mean, yeah, if you bring the KSV in this boss fight, you'll never break his armor, and you will think he's a bullet sponge because you'll die before you even get off the first part of the first phase. But if you bring in weapons like the Maelstrom, the Olympia, the Kilo, even the Compact with the right attachments, they can all break his armor and damage his weak points very fast, making this a very fast, very intense, and most importantly, very enjoyable boss fight. Really, the only thing I dislike about this boss fight is the fact that the 4 swords, aka the wonder weapons, they're pretty much useless against the boss, and that really does suck. It does. But that aside, I think it's a fantastic boss fight that would have been S tier if just, again, the swords are just a little bit better. Now we're moving into my S tier. Now, these are, in my opinion, the best boss fights the Zombies franchise has to offer. I love doing these boss fights every single time I do them. Some of these fights are really hard. Others are just really freaking good, and the true best of the best can combine the two to make a fantastic boss fight. So starting off my S tier is my 5th favorite boss fight of all time, and that is the Dragon and Nikolai fight on Garad Krovi. Like der Eisendrax, this boss fight was way ahead of its time. This is the first boss fight ever to have different parts to it. In part 1 of this fight, you team up with Nikolai to take out the dragon, and then after the first mid-game cutscene in Zombies history, you gotta take out Nikolai's mech to win. This is an incredible boss fight, and it's a pretty difficult fight as well. And you might have forgotten that because every single time you do this boss fight, you load in with Idolize, but if you just don't bring that gobblegum in this fight, then you'll see just how challenging this boss fight is. Nikolai's attacks are all pretty aggressive, from his wraps to his machine gun. He can mess you up really quickly if you're not paying attention, but it's not like Richtofen where he's an unfair insta-down. This boss gives you just enough time to react to everything, but not too much time to where it's easy to avoid them. It's a fantastic fight that is easily the best that Black Ops 3 has to offer, and it is my 5th favorite boss fight of all time. My number 4 spot is the Pegasus/Perseus fight on Ancient Evil. If you know me, then you know that I absolutely love Ancient Evil's Easter egg. In my opinion, it's the single best Easter egg of all time. Let me know in the comments if you want to see me rank all the Easter eggs like this next. And a part of the reason why is just because this entire Easter egg from front to back is a blast, but this boss fight is the icing on the cake. From fighting on Mount Olympus to being able to travel to 3 different areas that'll blow up over time and the boss fight will get smaller and smaller, to fighting Pegasus and then Perseus with the unique way to kill them and using a specialist on them over and over again. And needing to charge a specialist like 6 times might sound annoying, but if you stand in the fire that Perseus throws on the ground, then it'll recharge a specialist extremely fast, so this isn't even an issue. Overall, I just love this boss fight. It's a phenomenal way to end off a fantastic quest and map that unfortunately we will never see what happens next because Chaos got scrapped. But boy, did they go out with a bang. My 3rd favorite boss fight of all time is my favorite Black Ops 6 boss fight, and that is Patient 13. Everyone has those moments in Zombies where they'll never forget the first time they played a certain map, encountered a certain enemy, built and used a wonder weapon for the first time. Everyone has those specific moments for them that'll trigger a dopamine rush. And for me, one of those moments was the first time I ever fought Patient 13. First off, again, look at this freaking sick design. Oh my god. Holy shit. Oh my god. This is Jason Blundell's wet dream. And then you got the fight itself, which is a ton of fun. There's 3 phases, which each one getting harder over time, both because tougher enemies will spawn, but also he'll keep changing his weak points to different parts of his body during the fight. And real quick, another small thing about this boss fight that I love is that every different version of him has a specific ammo mod weakness. So no matter what ammo mod you bring in here, at some point it will be extremely helpful in this fight. That's not all you gotta worry about with him either, because another huge thing about this boss fight that most boss fights get wrong is that in most boss fights, the boss isn't the threat, the overwhelming amount of zombies are. But in Terminus's boss fight, Patient 13 is a huge threat to you because all it takes is for you to not pay attention and run out in the middle, and he slams his tentacles down and one hit downs you. And he's especially a threat in the final phase, where he's trying to grab you with his tongue. And I didn't even mention this map's absolutely amazing boss fight arena, nor its soundtrack either. Like, I'm sitting here trying to think of reasons to not like this boss fight, but I just can't. As y'all know, I absolutely love Terminus so much, and this boss fight is a huge reason as to why. My 2nd favorite boss fight of all time is, drumroll please, who are we kidding? You all know what number 1 is. The Eye of Odin boss fight from Voyage of Despair. A lot of people haven't experienced these top 2 boss fights because of the games and maps that they're on, but if you haven't tried these next 2 boss fights I'm gonna talk about, then you seriously need to go give them a shot after this video. This boss fight is phenomenal. It has 5 phases taking place all around the map. In the first 2, you gotta take out an onslaught of enemies, and then in the 3rd and 4th phase, you gotta damage the eye when he's shooting the beam at you, and then in the 5th and final phase, you gotta damage him some more and also stop him from doing a wipeout attack that'll one-hit down you. You gotta do this 3 times to win. This is a great fight, and like it should, every single phase ramps up the difficulty until the final phase is really hard if you don't have 8 homunculus to spam. But seriously, if you've never played this boss fight, then you have to go try it. Even if you hate the rest of Voyage, it's still worth experiencing this boss fight because it's, in my opinion, the 2nd best boss fight of all time, and to this day, it is still my favorite Treyarch boss fight. But it's not the best boss fight because that would be, say it with me, the Mephistopheles boss fight from Infinite Warfare. Infinite Warfare has a super Easter egg in this game where once you complete all 5 Easter eggs, you unlock Director's Cut, which is basically the super Easter egg easy mode reward. But in Director's Cut, you gotta beat all 5 Easter eggs again, and once you do, you will unlock the secret super Easter egg boss fight, the Mephistopheles boss fight. This boss fight is absolutely insane. To beat it, you gotta stand on a talisman for around 20 seconds while Mephistopheles is constantly trying to take you out, and then you gotta shoot the souls at Meph, break the symbol on his body, and kill a wave of enemies to beat a phase. You have 6 phases to beat in this boss fight, and even from the very beginning, this boss fight's already more challenging than half of Black Ops 3's boss fights. But in every single phase, like it should, every single phase ramps out the difficulty, both because he'll introduce a new attack in every phase, and also the enemies you have to take out get harder too. For example, in phase 2 it's a slasher, but in phase 4, they're rhinos. By the time you're in phase 5, this is so hard that he will unleash fire tornadoes, which are easily his most deadly attack. Like, I don't know how many times I've died to this single attack alone. Then after you charge all 5 talismans, you gotta focus fire on Meph and spray him down while he's throwing everything he possibly can at you. He can spawn just about any enemy in this game on the map, and he'll be throwing every single attack at you that he possibly can. This last part is a pure fight to the death, but once you raise all 5 talismans in the air, you interact with the talismans to trap Mephistopheles, then you spray him a little bit more, and you will finally beat the boss fight. This boss fight is the single hardest boss fight in Zombies history, but it's also the single best boss fight in Zombies because of how this boss fight is structured, his attacks, this absolutely tremendous boss fight arena and soundtrack. This boss fight is just perfect, and I absolutely love it. If by chance Lee Ross or Brian Bright or any of the other Infinite Warfare devs are watching this, thank you all for making this boss fight, and I will cherish it for the rest of my life. So there was my final ranking for every single boss fight in Zombies history. If you enjoyed, make sure you like the video, and also a huge shout out to Rizzo for helping me with the Vanguard fights, A Total Dork for helping me rank the MWZ fights, and a third YouTuber that wanted to help that I unfortunately had to scrap from this video, which is Whitecliff Games. I made a noobsy and asked 2 different people for their opinions on Vanguard, and I thought doing so would balance out its ranking, but it ended up being like 3.5 minutes per Vanguard fight, which would have made those entries like twice as long as anything else on my list. So unfortunately, I did have to cut it, but I still want to say a huge thank you, Whitecliff, and I do apologize that I had to cut it out. So make sure you guys go subscribe to them. And also, shout out to one of my subscribers, King Dugga. I think. He helped me get one of the clips for Firebase C, and if you know me, you know how much I don't like playing on maps, so I gotta thank him as well for helping me with that. Shout out to my members, thank you all so much for supporting me. If you're a Black Ops 6 fan, click here to watch me rank every single map in that game, and with that being said, I will see you all in the next one. Peace out.